I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold's Derby, here with Edward K. Gibbon, Costume Designer for The Lost Daughter. Edward, when you signed on to create the costumes for this film, what was your brief? Putting it in, mildly, because there's so much going on in this film in terms of internal thoughts that the characters are having. So I'm very curious to know what Maggie, the writer-director, wanted you to create when it came to the costume design.
Yeah, no, you're right about a lot going on. Yeah, it was a really interesting brief because me and Maggie, obviously we've worked together before, so we kind of have a slight sort of visual shorthand in some ways. And I'd read the book before Maggie wrote the script, and then I wrote the script. So we kind of started off on those points, and we talked a lot before we actually ended up on the island. We talked in the weird beginning of the pandemic last year, when it sort of all felt a bit like a fantasy that it was actually going to happen, but it did, which was amazing, and all down to Maggie. So we sort of talked a lot about the reality of this, of like really kind of Maggie's real thing was really grounding the whole piece in the reality of it, and that these are real people. But also with this kind of slightly, we talked a lot about making it iconic, and particularly making Leda a kind of giving her some kind of iconic features that made her stand out a little bit, and always kind of without, I think it's always the same with costume. It's a kind of fine balance, isn't it, between, I'm very aware that what I do is part of the bigger picture, and that's why I love it as well, the kind of the collaborative element of it. And I think people always say you want to not notice the costumes, which is great, but at the same time you kind of do, because they need to signify certain things, they need to get messages across. And Maggie and me kind of talked about this this iconicness of it, and Maggie, we had loads of different references. We were kind of batting images backwards and forwards to each other, and Maggie was looking at lots of kind of Fellini films and Antonioni and kind of classic French films, and we were sort of pulling things from all over the place. And there was one particular movie, I can't remember the name, with I think it was an Antonioni with Monica Vitti in. And Maggie talked about falling in love with the sweater that she wore, and she really went on and on about the sweater, and I sort of said to her, I think maybe that's too iconic, because that's all you can remember about the film is this amazing sweater. So we had a bench line of what was iconic, but I think that was that was the brief. It was kind of real but stylized to a degree, and kind of iconic and memorable. So yeah,
clothing signifies so much. It can signify power, it can signify internal anguish, and the clothes maketh the man, that the cliche goes. But what you just said earlier really intrigues me, because I wonder, with costume designers and the head of a department, how challenging it is to balance, or strike a balance, between aesthetics and functionality. Like, you want something to be iconic and beautiful and eye-catching, but you've also got to work within, as you say, the bigger picture when designing for a given scene. How difficult is that?
It's difficult to a point, and I think you have to be very flexible, and you have to be very collaborative. And I'm never that kind of person that is like, this is what they're wearing. I don't have, even when I do period things, I try and be flexible, but especially with contemporary, I think you have to, you do have that big picture all the time, and you have some beats in the movie that you really want to kind of stress something. But at the same time, for example, in The Lost Daughter, when I first kind of thought about Dakota's character, Nina, I sort of envisaged her much more stylized and kind of much more put together. And the early things I pitched to Maggie were much more, over the top to a degree. And we sort of realized this was too much, and she didn't need it. And it kind of would have been distracting to the movie, I think. So I think, it is always a fine balance. And sometimes you're a bit like, oh, I really want to design something, I want to just do this massive dress on the beach or whatever, and it's just not appropriate. I'd kind of done these sort of Grecian flowing things for her when she kisses Paul Mescal and things like this. So I'd sort of gone off on a bit of a trip sometimes. But I think it's that flexibility all the time, and really, and Maggie, because Maggie's A, brilliant, B, written this incredible script, and you know, but at the same time she's completely open to collaboration, completely, you know, that's what's so lovely about working with her, is because she wants what you bring. And often there's a million ways to get to that. So I think you have to go through, sometimes you have to go through those million ways and not just think, oh, this is what it's got to be. Yeah.
You know, you obviously, you've worked with her before. You mentioned that that was on The Honourable Woman back in 2014. So it's been a little while, but it's nice when you can come back to somebody that you've worked with. What do you most value about her, apart from her wanting to collaborate? She mentioned on set that she really wanted to foster this this real camaraderie and empathy and love for each other, which sounds kind of like, yeah, I'll probably hear that all the time, but she was very compelling when she explained the way she wanted to work. What do you think about how she works?
I think she is, I mean, it's all, I start sounding a bit like a kind of crazy, scary fan sometimes. I talk about Maggie, but she is so this extraordinary person. And honestly, if anyone could make a movie in a pandemic, it was her. So that was the start. And I think just like my involvement with her, we worked together 2014, and it was a really brilliant experience. It was sort of the best job I've ever done in my life, I think, for lots of reasons. It was, and she was a big reason, part of that. And so we've kind of kept in touch a little bit. And then basically when I mean, I'd read about the movie a while ago, and then when I saw it was getting off the ground, I just wrote to her again and said, can I do it? And this was when it was still going to be in New York, and straight away she agreed. So I think, you know, that kind of commitment, or just there's a massive empathy and a massive kind of like, she really gets people, and she really wants to understand you, and and she appreciates. I think that all did lead up to, it was brilliant, it was very collaborative. And I think, you know, my relationship with her as well, working with her as an actor, and then obviously working with her the other side of the camera, her principal kind of ruling passion on this movie was that the actors had a good time, or that the actors were comfortable and were valued, and all those kind of things, which is always a big part of the job for me anyway. You know, I have to have this relationship with them. But here it was, you know, often she'd just say, oh, I don't mind what they wear as long as they're comfortable, as long as their shoes don't hurt, you know. And then of course she did mind what they're wearing, but and then we get to like, well, I don't know, maybe we could do this. So yeah, but I think that was her guiding principle always, was, and I mean, interesting, it was when I worked with Maggie, and we worked with a really good director that time as well. And one of his pieces of advice was just, you know, because it was quite a big deal working with Maggie. It was, you know, big movie star coming to Britain for the first time. And he just said, just listen, you know, just listen. And that's such an important part of my job, is like letting people talk. And I'm not letting you talk now, but
that's fascinating. Like, I would never have thought that about a costume designer, that you're taking on feedback and trying to design for that person's body and their persona and obviously character. You know, thinking of that, when you think about the leader character, a lot of her story is this unfiltered, unglamorous side of parenting, particularly motherhood. And I noticed that she starts off on the beach for a lot of the first part of the film in these sand-coloured kind of neutral tones, and then the colours start to come in later as we start to peel away. Obviously that was intentional, but I'd love to hear more from you on what you were achieving there.
Yeah, I think again the feeling was trying to create this sort of, this very measured kind of controlled look, in that, you know, and then when we contrast it with the flashbacks, we see the slightly messier life of young Leda, and the kind of that she can't get it together because things are too crazy, and we see a little bit of her starting to get it together once she meets Hardy, and she becomes a little more put together. So I think that was the kind of intention, to be sort of neutral, not to say too much, but also to give that kind of elegance, and as though she's a woman who knew what to wear, you know, or she was wearing clothes to appear that she knew what she was wearing. And then I suppose, as you well spotted, the kind of the color coming in was a bit more, was the sort of freeing of herself in a way, and not, you know, and it was difficult because of, you know, Maggie's big thing about the story was that we're never judgmental about these characters, and also that Leda isn't going crazy. Like, it's not a kind of woman losing her mind. It's just a
No.
woman finding different aspects of herself, or letting different layers come out. And and that was why the color, you know, that's why we did the pink dress, which actually reads as red, on camera for the dance. And it just felt suddenly like she was almost letting herself go, or becoming, yeah, the veneer was cracking a little bit.
Absolutely. And then I also noticed, like, costumes, as I mentioned earlier, empower people in many ways. And Leda was quite covered up, as opposed to Nina, whose clothing was very revealing. And even Dagmara Domenchik's character is, you know, her clothing is quite revealing as well on the beach. What was going on there? What were you trying to achieve with that dynamic?
I think, again, it, you know, for me with costume, it's always, you know, it's presenting the character, but then it's also how they interact with the other characters. So there's always the contrast and the, as you say with Leda, it was stripped back and neutral and more covered, and then giving the opportunity of the family to be almost an explosion of color and pattern, and just a more, you know, although they're really annoying, they're also kind of very joyful and this kind of life-giving, and everything that Leda is sort of trying not to be, or is frightened of. So I think, you know, they really exposed that. And I think Dakota, just the kind of the, you know, I mean, it was hilarious when I first talked to Dakota, and, you know, obviously swimsuits are a big thing and it's always an issue, and it's very, you know, can be very, it's very exposing, very
confronting,
yeah, you know. And I mean, again, Maggie made that so brilliant, and I think everyone felt way more comfortable because they knew, you know, they're in a safe space. But Dakota was completely up for like the most revealing. She just felt, and it felt so right for that character, because it's almost, it's not like a kind of in your face, look at me sexuality. It's much more of a kind of just a like, fuck it, I'm, you know, I know I look great, so I'll just get on with it. So I think, you know, so automatically you've got that contrast with Leda, and I think it really, I think it kind of highlights the differences on a subtle, well, not
it
that
does.
level.
Yeah, it really does. And also, when we see a lot of Nina towards the beginning of the film, we're seeing her from afar through Leda's eyes, but we're also seeing her in real close up, which is only what's going on in Leda's head. And we see the beads of sweat on Nina's skin, and we see the fabric on her, you know, on her front and on her backside. And and I just wonder if you're conscious of that when you're designing that. You're being told, we're going to zoom in here, we're going to really focus on fabric and texture and color and stuff like that.
Well, Maggie's writing was really, really brilliant as well, and very, very concise. And there was, you know, I think, again, it's all about surfaces, isn't it? And I think with Leda, you see one surface, and then you see beneath it as things go a little off kilter. And the same with Nina, you see her at a distance that she is the hot girl on the beach, and you know, is fabulous. And then you get a little closer, and things are a little bit less perfect and less tacky, you know, and Nina's tattoos aren't so fantastic, you know. All those kind of things were very, very deliberate. The brilliant makeup artist Davey added all these kind of slightly homemade tattoos to Nina, and Maggie kind of focuses in on those. So I think it was all very, I mean, we talked a lot about that, about the internal kind ofness, and again, that, sorry to take off thing, but I suppose the fact that we are experiencing it from Leda's head allowed us to slightly stylize things a bit as well. So, you know, sometimes you see things in much kind of like brighter or sharper definition than they actually are. So we kind of deliberately pump the color up on Nina and pump the shapes up a little bit and give her this very, you know, it's almost like she's so memorable to Leda. She'd like blink her, you know, close her eyes and she'd be able to picture her.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The gaze on the Nina character is so, it's almost breathtaking, and it's so ordinary at the same time. I found it very hard to pinpoint, but it made me kind of try to understand what Leda was thinking. And I remember at the end of the film thinking about the costumes and the sets and so forth, and just thinking you would have had some fun with holiday wear, because we know you go on a holiday or a vacation and it's the holiday from hell because it's full of really obnoxious people, and they're wearing gauche, mismatched, casual, kind of carefree. So was that the fun part of the job?
Yeah, to agree. I mean, we had to be slightly careful because all of the background people were, because we were in the bubble, because of the pandemic, so everyone was being tested. So we had a kind of small pool of people who were family and friends, and a lot of the time we were saying, oh, bring your clothes, you know, and they'd bring some like really extraordinary, horrible things, and you'd have to be very like, oh yeah, no, you look, that looks really good. But yeah, no, it was. I mean, I think again, you know, we had to be careful. Originally, again, I wanted to go further to some degrees. But yeah, no, it was interesting. And I think it just, you know, it immediately sets the scene, doesn't it? And you immediately feel for later that she's gone to this beautiful paradise and she just wants to be alone with her books. And suddenly the whole of Astoria is there. Yeah, no, you know, but again, I think it's, you know, and this is Maggie's thing as well, very much, is that not being judgmental. It's not, you know, we just, so that's always a fine line as well. Like, it's very easy to caricature, and we never wanted to do that. I don't think. I think it's just, yeah, they're annoying and they're loud, so their clothes are a little bit annoying and loud, you know. And when Tony arrives, you know.
Yeah, that's right. They felt authentic, and I think that really helps get us into the zone. There's one other thing that I noticed, and that was the necklace that Lita wears in both timelines.
Oh yeah,
pretty sure that's right. It's like a little Easter egg that a costume designer like yourself, I love those little touches, because you hope, I imagine, do you hope that audiences will notice those, or are you just throwing them in there hope just for subliminal kind of atmosphere?
Yeah. No, it's actually like a little cicada, you know, like an Egyptian, not a cicada, what are they called? What is that name?
Me too, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, and there's kind of references throughout the film to cicadas and grasshoppers and all those kind of things. So it was a nice little nod to that, and she's got a bracelet like that. Yeah, no, that was nice. It just felt she's very simple and very unadorned, and she's not the kind of person that, oh, what earrings shall I wear today, and what, you know. I mean, it's interesting because in the final cut we saw her in America originally, so there were some scenes we shot of her in an apartment in America, so we see her dressed slightly differently then, but always with the necklace. Yeah, and there was a really nice bit of synchronicity that Maggie wears a little cicada. It's not a cicada, is it? What is it called? Oh, it's terrible, sorry. But yes, Maggie won, and we kept seeing images of them as well around the island. There was one flat we filmed in that had a watercolor one. So yeah, it was just a nice, again, it was that sort of continuity thing, and this woman who sort of knows who she is, and just every day she's got the same basic things on.
Yeah. Offline we were talking about how contemporary costume design is, to my untrained eye, one of the hardest things to get right, because most people in the industry, I think, and maybe awards shows, often reward the most costumes as opposed to contemporary work, which I think is overlooked unfairly. Like, I think in the last 10 years, there's been 3 nominees at the Oscars. I think Mary Zophres in La La Land, Mark Bridges in The Joker, and Antonella Canarozzi for I Am Love. And those nominations always really excite a lot of us in this business, because we can see that, yes, the voters are taking notice of contemporary work and how difficult it is to support the story. And I'd love to hear from you as to what are the challenges of contemporary costume design.
I think, it's really brilliant that you think that, Robert. It's really interesting. I think one of the main things is, to a degree, everyone's an expert, and everyone gets dressed in the morning and everyone wears clothes. So you kind of, and you get that from all angles, from the producers, from the group, whatever. So I think there's that. Sometimes it's very hard to be specific with modern costume, and it's very hard to, my thing is always it has to be clothes rather than costume. But just by the very nature of it, as soon as you've got me in a room with an actor and a rack of clothes, it becomes costume somehow. I'm dressing them up, So I think, excuse me, that's one of the things to try and get over. You have to sort of really battle that, the kind of the artificiality of it and the falseness. And also for me, as I said before, like working with Maggie and people, that you really have to take on board that collaborative nature of it, and the fact that these actors, brilliant actors, are ultimately playing this character. And so in a way, they know this character more than you on one level, but then again, they also want your level of knowledge about the character. So it has to be when it works, then it's brilliant. It is a brilliant coming together of things, and it can't, sometimes it's very hard, again, because everyone gets dressed in the morning, and everyone knows what looks good on them, or what.
Yeah, that's right.
You sometimes, I sometimes work with actors and they kind of look down the clothes rail and go, God, I'd never wear any of this. But maybe it's right. And you're like, yeah, maybe it is, because you're not being yourself, you're being a character. So that's another thing that sometimes it can be a struggle, I think. But when it works, it really works. And it's almost like, I was saying this to someone else the other day, I have to kind of, you have to get over that artificiality of it as well. And you almost have to stop looking at them. Like I sort of do fittings with actors where I'll almost just turn my back, and then after a few minutes, I'll turn around again and look at them. And if it just feels normal and real, then that normally works. Whereas if you kind of know when things look artificial and look contrived, And again, it goes back to what we were talking about of knowing when to stop designing, almost like we don't need. I think it's the details, isn't it? And it's the little things, like you notice brilliantly, and hopefully other people get, whether it's subliminal, like in The Lost Daughters, there's kind of this whole slightly subliminal theme of the white dress all the time, and the little girls in the white dresses, Nina in the white, and then later ending up on the beach in a white dress. So little things like that, you kind of you try and hold on to. But thanks for noticing.
Yeah, well, I just find it such a fascinating art form, and it can go so horribly wrong if you're not firing on all cylinders. So on that note, I would thank you for your time. Congratulations on a wonderful work, a wonderful film, and good luck this award season.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much, Rob. Thanks. I'm really glad you enjoyed the movie.